Welcome back and many thanks for staying with us on the number one breakfast show in the country, Morning at NTV. I have Moses Mushime. He is the program officer in charge of economic inclusion and fiscal policy at the Initiative for Social and Economic Rights. He's not alone. We also do have Francis Muhire, an economist and lecturer with Makerere University Business School. Both gentlemen are going to be expounding more on the negative effects of this 42-day lockdown on the lives of the most vulnerable within this country. Very good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. All right. First of all, let's start about by discussing the impact of this 42-day lockdown on our people in this country, the most vulnerable. Let me start with you, Francis.
Yeah, thank you, Lomi. These are unprecedented times, and we are seeing this is the second lockdown after having the first one. So it's certain that big population people out there, they are poor, and they are suffering. So this notion or the definition of the vulnerable, me personally, I would actually call everyone that is not earning a salary right now to be vulnerable. So almost everyone that is not earning or getting a salary right now is vulnerable. So it's really going to be more painful. The second lockdown is going to be more painful than the first one. So we've seen our household incomes are reducing dramatically. And you're talking about, people have to spend on food. They don't have what, to spend on food and other, essentials or basic needs. Talk about, health. Almost people are sick, from flu, whether it's COVID or normal flu or other diseases. They are still spending heavily on the, on the health or medication, because we've seen our health or public, health, infrastructure, which is almost broken down. So they are forced to spend even the little what they have on this medication. So it's going to be, more painful than the first one.
All right, that is Francis Muhire, an economist and lecturer at Makerere Business School. We also do have Moses Mushime from the Initiative for Social and Economic Rights. So let's talk about whether or not this 42-day lockdown is going to widen the gap that we have been seeing between the rich and the poor. How dire is the situation?
Obviously, the inequality gap is going to increase. Even before the lockdown, the Gini coefficient, which is a measure of income inequality, was about 0.42%, and that was very significant. So the inequality is going to widen. We have seen people, the rich, continuing going to work. They have been making money throughout COVID, while the poor are at home, seated. We are talking about 2.5 million people who have run out of employment because of the lockdown. We are seeing women who cannot access health facilities because they do not have means to reach to health facilities, and that means increasing maternal mortality. We've seen the stillbirth rates also increasing in the previous lockdown. We had almost stillbirth and neonatal death increasing. We've seen children are not going to school. And as a result, girls and women have been subjected to sexual and gender-based violence. So this is where the lockdown is taking us.
And of course, on the issue of children not being able to go back to school, it also increases the gap between the rich and the poor, because as the children of the rich continue their education online, those of the poor are actually grappling at home with nothing to continue with their education.
Definitely.
And also the new tax on the internet, which is 12% on internet data, doesn't make the situation any better. Moses Mushime, expand more on that.
You see, if you could start with the tax on the internet. For example, we know that in other countries that are progressing, internet infrastructure is a means to access to basic education.
I hear you loud and clear.
And this, now we are taxing. At the time when we are talking about going to the digital and green economy. So, apart from me being a double tax, because already we pay tax on airtime, but it is going also to hinder people from poor families who cannot access data, or even who cannot access the gadgets to continue learning, to be part of the learning, the continued learning process.
Indeed.
And that is not good. But even when you look at the platforms that were deployed before, when you talk about the radios, the TV, many households that are poor could not access those platforms. So we are seeing children of the rich, those who are international schools, continuing to access education, being promoted, while the poor are still seated at home. So that is not good for the country, obviously.
All right. Francis Muhira, when we were actually talking over the phone yesterday in anticipation of this conversation, I largely did hint to you that the situation is really dire because July 1st we had some new 7 taxes that were initiated courtesy of the new financial year. One of it is the 12% on data. You do have the 30% on income. Rental income tax, the 30%, meaning if the landlords are grappling, the trickle-down effect is going to be on the tenants who are not actually bringing any money. So how dire is this situation?
Yeah, you know, it's unfortunate, you know, when the minister presented those tax bills, I'm one of those people that came out and I was against it. I actually called this, you know, as a tax pandemic. You know, the timing is wrong. You know, someone might think that the COVID is going to mull after 1 year, after 2 years, but I'm telling COVID is going to be here for a long time. So therefore, bringing taxes, you know, such a taxes immediately after the first lockdown was a very huge, you know, or fundamental mistake, which should be rectified. So first of all, talking about the internet tax, you're talking about, actually this is an additional 12% internet tax. Already you have already 18. That is value added tax. So it makes it, you know, a total of 30%. You know, this is really huge. And you are talking about, you know, the world right now is going through a 4th industrial revolution, which works on internet. Every country is trying to embrace it, making internet cheaper so that actually all the citizens can get on board and benefit from the ongoing industrial revolution. We've, you know, for example, Uganda or Africa in general, you know, didn't be, you know, it wasn't part of the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd industrial revolution. So we are saying this is the 4th industrial revolution. Why don't you really make it easy, cheap, create this infrastructure for your people to get on board and benefit from this? So, but it goes beyond. When we talk about internet data, it goes beyond just that. I mean, you've seen the youth, you know, earning from YouTube. You know, they are using internet. It has created employment opportunities. That is the other challenge. The world is going digital. Everything is digital. You know, business people are trying to reach customers online. You know, talk about online education, and instead you're increasing the price of data. So it is very, very, it's a big mistake to bring.
Talk about the plight of the tenants. I'm in a room, a single house, around 8,000. I'm paying for it every month. I have nothing to eat, so I'm locking myself in this house every day for fear of being seen because I cannot beg. I'm a man. So ideally, you also do have a landlord that is on your neck. You're not bringing in any money because he's also in a very tight situation. He has a 30% tax on his rentals. So what can he do? So expand more on that plight of people who are in their homes, hungry and no money for rent.
So the government, you know, brought that rental income tax, which is 30%. It's unfortunate. The government thinks they are going to be taxing the landlords. They think the landlords have the money, just like the way they brought in this fuel tax so that they can target people who have money. Think that people who have cars have money, which is not the case. You're going to bring in this tax, thinking you're going to target the landlords, but it's not the landlords who are going to pay this burden. The landlords are going to shift the entire burden to the tenants. Remember, there are people who are already home, people who are already frustrated, people are coming from the first lockdown, now they're into the second lockdown. They are already doing bad. They don't have, you know, any disposable incomes, you know, left. So you're bringing more burden. So this is another huge mistake. This is not the right time to be bringing in these taxes. But the question is, why do you think the government is panicking to bring in all these taxes? Why? Because our debt distress risk has reached the highest level. It's no longer sustainable. We are talking about the debt GDP ratio having, you know, gone beyond the threshold of 50%. We are now talking about 51%.
Yes, Mateo Kasaija was also crying last week.
Yes.
For the first time, I could see him very, very shaky in his boots, saying, what are we going to do about this skyrocketing public debt?
Why would he cry when he's the one presenting all these debt, you know, loan applications?
Indeed.
So the government is panicking because they want more money. They have borrowed. We are talking about 34% of the budget allocations going to debt repayment. But the question, before the government think of talking about bringing taxes on board because they need, you know, revenue to service these loans or debts, the question is, the borrowed resources, what did you use it for? You know, we've seen the government putting resources into non-productive sectors.
They get the money, they say it's for COVID-19, but then when they start distributing the money, it's not going for the
It's not doing what it's intended to do. So that's the challenge we have. And it all starts about resource allocation. Until the government realizes that we are in, you know, unprecedented times. This is a pandemic. We have to change the spending behaviors, rearrange our priorities. Then we are headed for doom. Yeah.
How best do we reduce this trend where we are borrowing left, right, and center, Moses Mushime? Because we are looking at a public debt stock which is rising. We're now talking about 68 trillion Uganda shillings, all the way from 65 as of December of 2020. And in 2019, we're talking about 49 trillion Uganda shillings. So every financial year, we keep on seeing an exponential increase in the amount of money we are borrowing. Is this debt sustainable moving forward?
Of course, it cannot be sustainable. And the cost of the debt is lack of investment in public services, services that are critical like health and education. And this is what we have been telling government. But the best way to reign over this debt that is rising at astronomical levels is to expand the domestic revenue base. And that includes expanding the base in terms of bringing more people into the tax bracket. We have an informal sector that is not taxed largely. And it is incumbent upon Uganda Revenue Authority to bring more people. We have about only 1.5 million Ugandans who are paying taxes. The rest do not pay taxes. When we have around 20 million Ugandans who are, maybe could be earning.
I hear you, Moses. So, and basing on the 68 trillion Uganda shillings, the date, and you just mentioned that 1.5 million Ugandans are paying for their taxes. So meaning, for us to pay that date, Ugandans have to cough at least 1.5 million Uganda shillings, each Ugandan.
No, it's 1.7.
1.7.
Exactly, not as good.
Each Ugandan is now indebted with 1.7.
To cover the 68 trillion Uganda shillings.
It's actually it's 71.5 trillion.
Where is that money going to come from, Moses? Now that many people are largely at home grappling with this 42-day lockdown, no work.
Of course, we are going to be a colonically indebted country for the next generation. That one is obvious. But we need to invest in local revenue resource mobilization, including now that we have oil prospects, to make sure that we are managing well. We increase efficiency in terms of tax collection, but also when it comes to spending, we need to see when COVID abates, we need to see government doing fiscal consolidation, where we spend in priority areas. We know there are elements in the current budget that are budget lines that are potentially wasteful. So we need to consolidate in the short term, but also in the long run, and also invest in local revenue resource mobilization, including oil and gas, and also increase our tax base, so that we, in the near future, we can finance our budget 100%.
Let's discuss the impact of this lockdown on the economy as a whole. Mr. Francis.
Yeah, first of all, when you talk of the impact, with the lockdown, we are talking about almost the entire economic activity put on hold, and automatically we're going to see unemployment, going high. We saw the first lockdown, over 2.5 million people packed up, they became unemployed. They were trying, things, trying to get back to normal. We had to go back to the second one. So you're going to see an increase in unemployment. That is obvious. Of course, the other economic impact from the macroeconomic perspective is also inflation. We've seen inflation going high, and most likely we might see a double digit. We might see it very soon. And the other impact is about income inequality or wealth gap. Just as he has said, with this pandemic, the government is overborrowing, and you see when you overborrow, who's going to pay? It is the taxpayer. And who's going to, talking about the taxpayer, you have the government borrowing, from the domestic market, and who's going to lend the government? Absolutely, it is the rich person, not the poor person. So that alone is going to create or widen the gap between the rich and the poor. So in other words, the poor are working actually in this whole pandemic.
Moses Mushime, are we falling more into debt traps in the name of fighting COVID-19?
Yes, and unfortunately.
Because we've borrowed almost $3 billion since 2019, and we seem to be borrowing more, but the economy is still slowing down.
Yes.
What seems to be the problem?
Well, of course, the deficit is high now that the revenue have slowed down, so government has a lot of deficit to cover. Unfortunately, government does not want to spend within its means. But the most unfortunate part is the misuse of this money, lack of accountability. And It hurts because now we are talking about life. Every coin that is lost is a life that is misused. Every coin that is misused is a life lost. It is an opportunity to someone that is foregone. It's the rights of Ugandans that are being trampled upon. So it is unfortunate that we are accumulating a lot of debt. But a significant part of this money is wasted. It is stolen. It is not accounted for. We spend in non-priority sectors. Currently, we do not have oxygen in hospitals. We do not have, there is no vaccine in this country that the country has bought. All vaccines we have is donated vaccine.
We are going to talk about that.
So that is very unfortunate. We are falling in a debt trap. And like I told you, the borrowing is going to continue, probably in the next 5-10 years. Because when you look at the deficit we have only funding around below 50% of our budget. And that is expected even in the next 5 years. So we are in a trap, definitely. And this is a conundrum that we are not ready to move out of, because the revenue resource mobilization at local level is still very low. And we are not spending rationally in sectors that would transform the economy very fast. And let me tell you this. We know the approach of this government has been to invest a lot in infrastructure. But actually, research shows that for you to have a transformative effect, to bring everyone in the middle income level, you have to spend on social protection. So the more you invest in public infrastructure, roads are good, we know. Electricity is good, but that increases the inequality gap, because we have a lot of people who are not able to access basic things.
So if social protection infrastructure had been ratified in a very, very good manner, we wouldn't be in this situation.
Yes, we would see people rising out of poverty.
I see.
Minister of Gender will tell you that the small component they have on SAGE has actually reduced poverty among those households that are beneficiaries by 19 percentage points.
Thank you very much,
very important
Moses Mushime. Let's also bring in Francis Muhire. And Francis, let's talk about whether or not government's interventions have been sufficient enough, starting with the vaccine distribution that has been taking center stage in this country. It's been a slow rollout. We can also expand more on what is happening on the global scene, issues to do with vaccine equity. Richer countries are booking vaccines now and for the future, which is at the disservice of the African countries. Let's expand more on that.
Thank you.
Local and then international.
First of all, when you talk of the vaccine, economic game, it's another huge, another topic. Around 2019, the pharmaceutical market was around 1.3 trillion US dollars. That was around 2019, and only 3% of that was, to do with vaccines. But of course, when we saw the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, coming up, we saw all governments coming on board. That's the serious governments, coming on board, betting, investing huge sums of money. Talk about USA so far has already invested over 10 billion US dollars into vaccine development. Because you see, vaccine development it's a very risky venture. So it is the governments or the public sector that has to invest, especially from the initial stages. So we've seen governments like USA, UK, China, and Russia investing hugely into vaccine development, while African countries or developing countries, including Uganda, we are there waiting for these, people to come up with these vaccines. But the vaccine business has been dominated by only 4 pharmaceutical companies. You talk about GSK, you talk about Pfizer, you talk about Merck and Sofina. These are only 4 pharmaceutical companies that have been into this business of vaccines. So this gives them a high market power. They set this price at a higher levels because they are monopolies. You talk about only 4 companies. But with COVID-19, we've seen other few companies coming on board like Moderna and Oxford AstraZeneca. So they have invested huge sums of money. They have come up with these vaccines. Remember,
but then they've refused to waive patents on the same vaccine.
Yes,
so that
remember the
fastest.
Remember the fastest vaccine developed was MAPS vaccine, which was made in 4 years. Other vaccines have been taking over 10 years plus. But because there was this emergence of COVID-19, they had to put in everything, use the new technology like M1 technology, and they have come up with vaccines within less than actually 2 years. Now, remember the market is unlimited, and they have to maintain a high price. So they have to control the price, the supply, by producing in low volumes, so that the price remains high. Because for them, they are targeting at the high end or the developed economies first, because that's where they can get the best profit margin. So that's why you've seen countries like Canada, USA, all of them have booked in advance. Talk about the European Union. It has said every vaccine produced in the European Union shouldn't be getting out, because they want first ensure for their own market.
Vaccine nationalism.
Exactly. While these few pharmaceutical companies are making a lot of money. So what they have done, or what they normally do, with time, they give, let's say, license to other developing countries, pharmaceutical companies. And in this case, they gave, Oxford AstraZeneca gave a license to Serum Institute of India Limited, so that they can produce, in large volumes, because for them, they have capacity to produce in large volumes. However, what they're going to be producing is a variated version. The quality may not be as good as that of Oxford AstraZeneca. That's why you have some questions to do.
So meaning the vaccines on the market might not fizzle out the pandemic as we want it to, and it might be here for years to come.
Exactly. So the issue is about the supply and who is the main manufacturer, because they have patent, they can control how many or in volumes we're going to produce, because for them they want to make money. So while they want to make money, they want to first ensure that their own markets are well covered, and then for Africa and other developing economies can come in.
Let's talk about what we are doing here locally in Uganda. You have a finance minister who doesn't know whether or not money for COVID-19 vaccines was dispatched or not. He doesn't know. So we would like to know, are the interventions by government actually enough?
It is very, saddening. That's why you saw the president the other time complaining that, these, European countries have refused to give, they have hoarded the vaccines. But the question, what are we doing? What have we learned from the previous experiences? Until Uganda and Africa, we start to invest heavily in R&D, research and development, so that we come up with our own solution. Because I can assure you that Uganda as a country, we have capacity to produce our own vaccines, but you're not going to start today, meaning that you should start like yesterday. You get the point.
COVID-19 was approved. It's not a vaccine.
Yeah, so
government is also working on its own version.
Yeah,
we are waiting to see what will culminate from that.
So while the government, has put aside 560 billion, to procure these vaccines, they have nowhere to buy it from, because those who have it, they don't want to sell for now. So it's high time we invest in research and development and come up with our own solution.
Research and development. Now, Moses Mushime, before I let you gentlemen go, your last thoughts on this conversation before I let you gentlemen go. Moses Mushime, what government should be doing during this interim?
Well, we've seen government coming up with the COVID-19 relief plan, where they have said they are going to target 500 households, and each household will get 100,000. I think that is a fuss, because first of all, it is not based on science. Our simulations based on U-boat statistics show that we have about 2 million households that are in need of cash in urban areas. But we also know that the same statistics show us that every household on a monthly basis spends around 320,000. And it's higher even for urban households that spend around 420,000. So part of that money, about 46%, goes to food. But we know households are spending on energy, they are spending on health, they are spending on education, and that is very, very important.
Indeed.
So beyond that, we would want to see government increasing the target to at least 2 million households. We need to see government also increasing that portion. 100 is not enough.
Moses Mushime is a program officer in charge of economic inclusion and fiscal policy at the Initiative for Social and Initiative for Social and Economic Rights. We also did have Francis Muhire. He is a lecturer and economist, a lecturer at Makerere University Business School and an economist. Thank you, gentlemen, for having made the time to speak to us. We also do have on the other line Stephen Mbide ready to engage us on what is happening within Chisenyi area. Very good morning, Stephen Mbide. What's the latest?